The Season 3 episodes for Freelance Creative Exchange are recorded on Audio-technica microphones.
Click on the show notes below to find out more.
Hi everyone, this is Jace.
And I'm Yan Ling.
Welcome to another episode of the Freelance Creative Exchange, where every episode we talk about the gig economy as well as the freelance economy.
And today we have another special guest with us, Nicholas.
Hi.
So some of you might be very familiar with Nicholas. Actually, in fact, Jace and Fanny themselves have been on Nicholas' own Facebook live stream, where he also talks about the creative industry as well as the what's happening right now.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm trying to do about twice a week.
Very regular. Yeah. So for those of y'all who don't know who Nicholas Chee is, right? So he's actually a very famous and popular figure nowadays. So Nicholas is a award-winning film director, right? A producer, consultant for film and media projects. So he's also currently the festival co-director for Sea Shots Film Festivals, which is a short film festival focusing on Southeast Asia short films based in Malaysia. So maybe without further ado, let me get Nicholas to introduce a bit about himself.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for watching this. It's very strange for me to do this as a guest because I've been doing the stream as a host.
Right.
So I think my background actually started from, professional background, started as a photographer. I actually studied photography, and I studied in Temasek School of Design. I visual comm course, and I majored in photography. So my background is actually more photography based. But prior to that, I've always been interested in music. So I have played music since I was about 16. Played guitar, and I got bored with photography. Started to think about what I want to do next, and so of course you take visuals and you take music, and then the next natural progression was film. And but the difference is I'm probably one of the people in the industry that hasn't gone to film school. So I really came from a TV junkie, watching as a consumer. So my perspective in terms of film and cinema is also quite different. It's always closer to the general audience taste. So that led me to think about audience perspective, and I think one thing led to the other. We started Sinema.sg and started Sinema Old School, which is a community theatre down back in 2007, and our focus was quite the reverse of Substation or the other film community entities or venues. Is we are more focused on audience and audience education.
Right.
So it has been that, and then it's been so many years, and now we are doing film-related projects. Like I created Sin 65 for Nexus, created the National Youth Film Awards for Escape, and so that's a brief snapshot of the journey.
Wow. And currently, we understand that you also created a very active Facebook group, right? Based on COVID-19, of course, right? But maybe let us share with our audience what are some of the motivation behind creating the Facebook group in the first place, right? And where do you see this group moving forwards?
Okay, so the Facebook group that Jace has mentioned is called the SG COVID Creative and Cultural Professionals Support Group. I think I missed out a few words, but in short, if you want to search for it, you can search for SG COVID-19 CC.
Don't worry, we'll put the link in all the descriptions.
And the reason why it was started was because I actually posted a Facebook post on my page. That was somewhere in late January when things was going a bit serious in Wuhan, China, and I did foresee that it's going to come spill over to, or at least spill over outside of China. So I was concerned about the situation, and we had like some jobs that were postponed because the cases are starting to emerge in Singapore. So I posted about how for my friends who are working in the civil service, please help us, the ones who are outside. To the effect that saying that it's nice and warm and cozy where you are, because the impact that they will receive is actually not great, definitely. But at the same time, because we're all connected, and especially those who are in stat boards like IMDA who are interfacing with us in the industry so closely, do react a little bit quicker and discuss and how that might impact our industry if the worst case scenario happens, which unfortunately it has happened today. So my friend wanted to share that post, and because she found out that her friends got her events cancelled, and those freelance photographers, events people, they are hit the fastest because that's public facing,
immediate.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, why don't we just start a group so that we can just chat and share. It's never intended to be a public group like that. So, but one thing led to the other. It just exploded, and then we have like 3,300 people today. It's growing really fast. Yeah.
Speaking of one thing leads to another, the name of the group itself has changed a couple of times as well, right?
Yeah, it's changed once actually, because before the name was COVID-19, it was coronavirus or something.
Yeah, correct.
But it does also, like, I think it's very interesting, and you mentioned it briefly to us before we started the podcast, was there's that emphasis of creative/cultural.
Yes.
It's not just creative. We just sort of lump it all together. But can you just go into more detail about why you put the word cultural there as well?
Oh, okay. I mean, being in the industry for a while now, you realize that there's a lot of fragmentation.
Yeah.
This is pertaining to us, and the fragmentation in our landscape in terms of creative and arts and culture and music, and if you try to expand, you actually see that there are a lot of vertical silo groups.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I also learned that for any successful industry to happen, we cannot ignore that there are different sectors, but how we should actually not look at the differences, but look at the similarities, the common parts that we work together. Because like a film will have music, you have art, you have all sorts of actors, performers. You have all sorts of vertical sectors coming in to make one film. And I think the arts community, or if I would say the creative community, has been growing, but it has been growing without a very concerted goal of wanting to achieve something beyond the Singapore shores, which is then in turn the crux of our problem today, because we hardly see many of our works being exported or consumed by outside of the country. So all these things, when you put everything together, then I realized actually we cannot see this as separate entities. We can't say because it's the National Arts Council that is your thing, and then other people maybe belong to IMDA. But then in the course of conversations with members in the group, I realized that what I was first and foremost, a photographer, actually do not fall into
Any of it.
So in the group, I actually said that it's important for us to first identify our parent, in a sense the parent, because that's the start of the problem, right? So if we cannot identify our parent, we cannot ask for help. So photographers, being a very curious group, that they think that they belong to IMDA. And then, but the thing is, when I got my bursary from NAC to study photography in the UK, it was the NAC. So that got me to think, actually there's a differentiation between you as an artist in your medium versus you working as a professional. Maybe I'm a trained photographer, but I cannot be a practicing artist. So I need to take on maybe commercial work, like maybe portraits or something. But when I do that, that work is outside of the jurisdiction of NAC. It's not art, right? In that sense, because there's a commercial and trade exchange, but then it doesn't have a parent. So what happened? So during this fallout, it became very apparent that there are a lot of orphans around. Even music suffer from the same thing. You know, who do you think music or musicians fall under?
I always thought it's NAC actually.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't
Yeah.
know why, but maybe because NAC organize like songwriting competitions,
Yeah.
or something like that. So you always associate music to NAC.
Actually, anything that doesn't fall under IMDA, I think it's NAC.
Yeah. So that's why I thought that differentiation is actually not beneficial, because it
Yeah.
actually makes official or supported collaborations a lot harder.
That's
Do
true.
you think this is something that is unique to Singapore, or actually, if let's say we put our eyes on other culture industry like the UK, or the US, or let's say just even our neighbor like Malaysia, right? Is this something that is also happening in those countries, or is actually just a very unique thing in Singapore because we need to, how should I say, we need to put things into pockets. or
Yeah,
into
we like to
box.
categorize.
Yeah, we need to. We like to categorize because it's more structure, more system in that sense, right? What do you think? Do you think that is something that is uniquely us?
So I have I've started my Taiwan branch office for the Flying Kick Asia, which is a production company that started as well, since 1.5 years ago. So I'm actually living in Taiwan, in the sense that I spend a lot of time, and by right I'm supposed to be there, and I'm supposed to spend 18 days every month in Taiwan and 12
Right.
here. And then one of the reasons why I decided to set up a branch in Taiwan was the same reason why I mentioned earlier about our works going out, our talents going out to an industry that's probably more mature. I don't think I want to use the example of UK or the US, because they're far away advanced industries, right? But in Taiwan also, growing up, you learn that if you want to be a singer, you have to go out first. So a lot of very successful singers,
Yeah.
that are Singaporean, like JJ,
Yeah.
Tanya, and
Stephanie,
Stephanie Sun, and all that, they have to have a break outside of the country,
Yeah,
and Taiwan is the destination. And in terms of cultural development, we are quite similar to Taiwan in terms of being the 4 Asian tigers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll use that as a reference point. So my time spent in Taiwan taught me that the cultural industry should actually see themselves as part of one. I want to use the word creative here in Singapore also because we have a creative industry push somewhere in 2007-8, right about 12 years ago, right? So that was under MCI.
When they started to push a little bit more for the industry.
Before there was really a project. I think we were one of the grant recipients as well. I think I remember pitching for it for Sinema and Sinema Old School, an incubator program that are created to help more young people make films. That was really long time ago. I mean, the access is a lot now. But coming back to the question, compared to countries that have actually grown with us, like say Taiwan, we started manufacturing together. We do the whole, and then what you call that, the IC chips, wafer fab.
Yeah.
That was one of the very big things that we grew together alongside with Korea as well.
Yep.
And what I've noticed is that they have often worked together, be it being government initiated at the top level, at ministry level. They also have somewhat like stat boards and also councils that maybe takes care of film and then music and whatnot, but they have very close collaboration because their objective is not about competing locally. Their objective is actually how do we export
Yeah.
our culture and content, because that becomes a important GDP driver.
Yep.
So I look at that and say, hey, look, there's a massive push now in Taiwan also to start exporting and outreaching to Southeast Asia, because that's a new policy called the New Southbound Policy, 新南向政策. So they want to tap on the Southeast Asian market. But I look at us then in reverse and say, why are we so slow in doing the same,
Yeah.
be it at government level or be it at our own industry level? So that led me to find out what was the root cause. And also along the way we find out that a lot of people say that people are undercutting, and are not paying the right fees. And when you have
Rates and all
when you
this,
have things like that, you add together, then you realize actually because we are so busy competing in a very small market, that we forget that we should be actually coming together, building great products, and then exporting out to the rest of the world, because we do have very unique cultural identity and heritage that doesn't exist outside. Maybe you are very similar to Malaysia. No, this is what Alvin Tan from the Necessary Stage has said, that because we don't realize we have that, we don't know how to make use of it as what you call that?
To use it to our advantage.
It's become, we think that it's our liability that we don't speak like the Americans or the British, but we don't realize what we have is actually an asset that we should capitalize on. That's why by putting the more softer arts and the arts and the culture side together with the more business centric, the media sector and the creative, the design and whatnot, putting them together, we could perhaps find a balance between what is truly creative and with the sensibilities of business, because it's at the end of the day, it's a business. Right?
So do you think the current situation, right, because unfortunate, of course, a lot of the freelancers, because being individual unit, we are the one who is being hit the most, right, and also probably I would say maybe the least prepared for a situation like this. So for freelancers that is least prepared for this whole situation to take place, right, what do you think can be some of the solutions that they can work on together, and how do you think this current situation will actually help us in a way to unite the creative industry together and then grow progressively, when the situation recovers?
Okay, so the first question about the freelancers, I really feel for the freelancers also, because I started as a freelancer and I graduated in 2003, which is actually...
So you just told us your age.
No, actually, I'm actually older than that.
Okay.
Yeah, because
When
I
you graduated.
actually studied engineering first.
Okay, so you take a detour.
I quit second year and then I went to NS, and then when I came out, I went back to design school. So I was like
So you are left and right brain, all very active.
I need to plan out systems and structure. I really enjoy that, and then I also enjoy breaking the structures. So it's ironic, right? But as a freelancer, I think we have everything stacked against us, even in peacetime, because the competition and then against a small marketplace versus purchasing power of companies. Because we used to be regional marketing and advertising hub, where the money used to be big. I think a lot of freelancers today, they are saying, how come the rates are lower than 20 years ago? But they don't, it's very hard to explain unless one studies or understands what is macroeconomics, and then they can see the micro, because they see chicken rice get expensive, so therefore their wages should be, but they don't realize the circumstance of why the regional market has actually shifted to China, which means content production and advertising, the money is in China. They do the China version, they do the APAC version. So when we are no longer the commercial and advertising hub, the money doesn't exist. We still need to create things, but then the budget becomes smaller, so it all flows down backwards. So the good thing that we have right now, in spite of the COVID-19 situation, is our government. I have to give them credit when it's due.
Of course.
To be fair, there are a lot of immediate things that they want to come up. They have actually come up with as grants. Whether or not it's directly beneficial yet, you have to understand that the situation is evolving all the time.
Day by day.
Exactly.
Day by day, which is even more important for us to answer your second question. Coming together, sharing the stories, the situations, having conversations, have a bit of self-help. So when people have questions, somebody else help. So this peer-to-peer support. And then consolidate the information and data to share it with the authorities, because the G don't have, they can only do as much based on as much information as they have. And we can say that they are not interfacing, they are not asking you, they're not coming down to ask you, are you okay? But it's not possible
when you're such an individual in such a huge sea, right? Yeah, that's right.
They can't do G to one, but they can do G to association,
G to group.
G to group, which is why I've been encouraging people to look at which associations they might fall into, and there are wonderful ones like I'll talk about the media industry. So Jasmine has created
Yep.
the
Step. Yeah.
Singapore Association for Motion Pictures Professional. And that doesn't look at your individual craft. So everybody can
Yeah.
go in and they say, that, but there's no department looking after my craft. Then I will tell them, then go and start the department there. Then you bring in a fellow member. So because it's already registered and set up, you just come in and then you just do your own thing. We are. I think maybe the problem with us is also because we are not self-starters. We've rote learning, and if the textbook doesn't say, then therefore we don't do it. So, but this is the problem that I think that that I have with authorities and with structure that allow me to understand that actually we have to be taking proactive actions for ourselves.
Yes.
Working with the government, giving them information, which is why I urge everyone to take the polls that's existing on the site. So the more people take the polls, the more data we have, the more we can make sense and share with the government, the better their schemes can be targeted.
Because one of the things that we also realize, I mean, if we draw comparisons, right, to US and UK, although, they are a bit far away, right, and in terms of, I would say, the state of growth of freelance economy, they definitely move faster.
Yes.
But one of the things that I noticed that comes up very strongly from the other side, like what you mentioned, right? They actually will take on the task themselves, right, to actually help in whatever way that they can to professionalize the industry. Right, to make suggestions. So I guess they realize that is their livelihood, right? They need to chart out and craft how the industry is going forward.
Yes.
And most importantly, right, I also realized that, I mean, of course, there's more professional associations that look at your craft, which is important because we all want, to excel and to be better. But I think a lot of the discussion actually centered not just on the craft itself, right? It's actually on the business aspect, right?
Yes.
Or on how you conduct your livelihood to actually ensure that you can sustain yourself. I think those are some of the questions and some of the discussion that I thought was kind of missing, right, in our local context.
Yes.
So if that's something that we can look at, I think that's a common factor that will bring all creative together, right? Because everybody need to survive, right? So, you have to know the business making part of it as well. I mean, even if you don't have, there will be somebody who can give you suggestions. And I guess that's probably one of the things that can bind everyone together, And one of the things that we don't have is really data, right? I mean, we know the number of freelancers, official ones from Ministry of Manpower, like 330,000 freelancers, and all this. But we don't have like the figure that back the creative sectors.
Yes.
Right. How much GDP are we contributing?
Yes.
Right. If you look at the UK way, right, they actually very clear. Right. They can say, okay, the freelancers actually contribute this much of the, GDP. These are the number of values of export from the sectors. I think those are the figures that will be very helpful to a government.
Yeah.
Right. When they actually assess how much help that they want to give, how much further push that they want to give. So I think that's something that we should actually look at as well. I mean, of course, not everything now because there's more urgent situation that we need to deal with. But I think progressively as we emerge from COVID-19, these are some of the best practices that I think we should look at. How do we compile it?
In fact, you're absolutely right on the statistics point. I have actually try to search for statistics, official data from the ministries, and we have a statistics body which always asks me to submit my company.
Oh,
Yeah.
But
correct.
I cannot
Yeah.
find anything that's related because it's either not really consolidated or maybe the numbers are too depressing. There's no point to show. But what I've managed to find is a piece from the National Arts Council. It's actually also under MCCY. It's actually the entire arts and culture industry in a snapshot and how they spend the money and things like that. So because we don't have numbers to ID what are our contributions in that sense, like you said, it's very hard to move forward. So that is one urgent task that needs to be done, whether be it something to do in line, maybe having a school, NUS, to work with the industry, also to work with in this case, it will be multiple agencies, IMDA, and then maybe NAC to sort of form a
task force,
a task force, or to have a sense of, we know this is the amount of people working, not just freelance professionals, but also companies, small business, and then the employees, and what is the makeup, what's the contribution. So with that, then we can actually know what sort of impact
Yeah.
directly, and then we can tailor to it.
So I guess we have a lot of things that we think should be done, but I think there's this still one larger question, right? Maybe what do you have in mind? All these groups aside, all the fissures aside, all our the issues aside, what do you think in your mind is that scenario that we are going for? What is the end goal that everybody should be working towards, be it the individuals, the small business, big businesses, to the government?
So I've actually distilled down, if you will, a game plan. It's my version, of course, might not be right, or it could be absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
The four things based on sensing all these years, it brought me to these 4 points, which I've actually shared with FSE, you, Jean, and Brenda and team. First thing is standards. So for anyone who considers him or herself as a professional, they must either know or decide or agree with a set of standards for their craft.
Yeah.
So if you are you could be a floral arrangement professional. So certain things you need to learn. You need to have certain accreditations, certifications, or training for this subject matter before we can say, okay, I'm open for business.
Yeah.
And also don't forget that freelancers are not poorer employees without CPF, because I think that's the mindset they have been carrying, which is not entirely accurate, because they should actually be viewing themselves as service providers. So you are no different from the aircon repairman who's independent, not working for a big company, but he is the professional aircon repairman person who has studied about
The mechanics of doing aircon,
and train in that, or car mechanic. So you're a service professional in your craft. So then therefore there's a minimum expectations of what you should therefore you charge. Therefore we know, and as consumers we know, therefore we pay. And then the plus and minus will be based on specialities. So that is number one, standards. So we need to have standards so that we can all move forward. So we can differentiate between advanced amateurs, hobbies, who maybe, let's just say today we have access to cameras who can do video. Does that mean that anybody with a camera capable of taking videos is then a videographer? Surely there's language, and so schools exist for this reason. Short courses exist for this reason. So standards are very important. So that's first part. Second part will be then contracts. Why contracts? Because with standards we are then able to determine scope of work and how much everything costs. And the contracts allow us to say, okay, buyer and seller, when we have this contract, I agree to provide this service for this amount of money. Or I agree to pay this amount of money for this scope of service, and these are the terms. These are my payment milestones, which is the third thing that I come to. If you do home renovation or you buy certain things, you order, realize that we are used to doing this thing called pay a deposit. Right? Companies are more diligent because they can, if a client engages us, we require them to pay a upfront
payment,
and then there are different milestones. Why? Simply because we know that when we engage freelancers, we have to then pay them after the shoot. But the project might be longer because the shoot might end first and then there's post-production. But we have to pay the freelancers that we engage. So we need that upfront to be able to pay them, plus the fact that the full-timers and the office needs to be paid for. So these are milestones payments and clearly defined. And then finally, the fourth thing will be development. How can an individual or professional look at their prospect of getting more skill sets? Because maybe there is a new, if I'm a car mechanic, I specialize in, say, Korean cars. Maybe there are new models with new functions. How do I then train myself or get training so that I can now work on the newer cars? Especially if I'm in the business for 10, 15, 20 years. Surely the first cars that I'm trained in may no longer be on the road, for example, that I need to learn. So if you put these four things together, standards, contracts, payments, milestones, and then you have development. You can see that pretty much forms a quite a good solid picture of what a freelance professional or even companies can use to as a framework for their profession or craft.
Yeah. So one thing in our last 8 years of dealing with freelancers, right? What is very apparent to us? I mean, I hate to use these words, but like between successful freelancers and probably surviving freelancers, right? So one of the things that we see which come very strongly at us for successful freelancers, right, is we always see a diversifications, whether is it in terms of their revenue streams or is it in terms of their skill sets, right? They will have one very strong dominant skill, right? So for example, a photographer. But then at the side, they probably have one or two others not so visible, businesses that's going on, right? Like maybe they are very good at teaching, right? So then they actually is an adjunct professor of a school, right? Or they have actually invested in like provision store, or a coffee shop, So in terms of so what I'm trying to say is I think it is the mindset about managing the business, because I think a lot of us feels that it's a craft and hence you cannot equate it to money. But for you to survive, you need to think about, making money as well. Right. So do you think that kind of mindset is something that will change, given the current situations? Or you think that, it will still continue as per normal, even post COVID-19?
This is actually a very interesting thing. I think first and foremost, there have been discussions, even at NTUC, FSC level. What they have mentioned also is that first and foremost, if you decide to be a freelance professional, you have to know that there's a business element of it, and not everyone is cut out to run a business. So again, I go back to the fact that freelance professionals are service providers. They need to run their books, and then they need to deal with maybe they even hire other freelancers. So that's employee management in a sense, and maybe they take out an office. Maybe if you're in a co-working space, there's also the rental and the administrative stuff they need to deal with. And I don't think not everyone is actually cut out. Maybe we have passion for a subject matter. Could be an illustrator. But if you want to do this as a freelance professional, there's a business aspect of it. So that's number one, right? And the second thing is also why people diversify is maybe they're not making enough money in that sense. And then maybe also because they are not professional enough. Or they do not market themselves, so people don't know they exist. It could be two things. So why we are so different from, let's say, more advanced Western freelance professionals is they in America, they are very strong in marketing. Which is now apparent in the case that because of Hollywood, we think American is great. But now you read the news and how they're dealing with COVID-19, actually it is not that great after all. So the perception is also very important. Like we know a lot of startups in the US, they take advantage of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, right? They can do that first video like it's damn real. With what I call a phantom or vaporware product could not be delivered as well.
That's true.
So marketing is also very important, which is why skills like social media, digital marketing is essential. But we don't want to run risk of being able to market very well but cannot deliver the product. So a lot of times the freelancers, the younger ones, the inexperienced ones, they tend to overpromise and underdeliver. Advanced, stable, and more professional freelancers tend to do the reverse. They tend to underpromise and they overdeliver. So there is a huge difference in that. So again, it brings me back to standards. Having standards right, allows people to trade between buyer and seller in the known sphere. We're expecting something, we pay for something, we get something. So that is important. I hear freelancers talking about payments and contracts, but they have never once stood up and said, I am not the same as the rest of you. I am actually trained in this area. I mean, this is going to offend a lot of people when I say this, but then there are actors who are constantly saying that how come they're only paid this amount of money. I'm not agreeing that certain rates are correct. What I'm saying is between someone who spent 3 years in acting school, honing their craft, paying their dues, really receive training, versus someone who maybe found acting as an interesting hobby and then got a chance to work on as an extra, and then started to do a bit of a commercial gig. That is, we can't wait.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not to say that people who don't go to school won't have talent, but what I'm saying is, then how do we measure a benchmark and standards? I would give more weight as a producer for a trained actor, because I know that as a director, the trained actor can look at the script and then they can give me
Feedback. Yeah.
and they can give me
Yeah,
variations.
and they can internalize it.
Yeah.
More.
I don't go so deep into the craft, but then the reverse will be, if you are hobbyist, you'll be a director. So what I do now, when you go on the set, you're not supposed to ask that question. You're supposed to just go.
Just
The
do it,
director have to look at everything and not direct you on set. So can you walk from here to here? I mean, yes, the blocking and stuff like that, but then that's where your training comes in, and that's where the differentiation. So with that, it allows us to all start at a much higher level, because that's where we have to compete. You know, it's not the same as if it's a neighborhood people's association at athletics meet versus a national,
correct, a national or even Olympics meet.
or even SEA Games. So there must be difference.
So given the current situation, we could also say that it is a chance or opportunity for the industry to actually reset ourselves,
Yes.
right? And then coming together and see how we can progress as a community much better after this. So what are some of the changes you wish to see, right, post COVID-19?
I don't think it's just me who wants to see. I feel that a lot of people now wants to see change in a positive way. I think that we all recognize that it's really an opportunity for us to reset, like you mentioned, just like how COVID-19 has reset.
A lot of the social
industries.
behaviors.
And ecology is improving, and then it makes us think if we are the
We are the
virus,
cause.
and then COVID-19 is the vaccine, if you will. And it's not just in a very micro way about our industry, but also how we work as a society, as part of a region, and as a member of the global economy as well. We have to relook. And if you notice, a lot of people are, a lot of live performances are taking on the streaming method, which is something that I have advocated for, because I like to watch theatre and classical music performances. But I am very fearful, because I have a very dry throat. I tend to suddenly bring it to cough.
Oh, you're the ones who like
I am the one
coughing in the background.
hacking away, and so because of that, right, and a few occasions I had been really afraid to attend, because I don't want to be the one that's like
Like at the stare.
yeah. So, but having said that, I also realize that arts consumption is not organic, it's quite low. Without the tote board fund, a lot of students will not have a chance, or the parents will not bring. It's not organic. It's not like we are, hey, okay, growing up, like we're growing up,
we
hey,
go.
let's go and watch a play today. The parents with the teenagers. It's not something we say, right? But then how then do we expose the younger generation to different arts and crafts, and how ultimately as a performer you want as many people to see your performance as possible.
Yes.
The recording, which is abundant and cheap now due to the democratization of video, and then streaming has allowed us to then relook at how we can have the arts reach more people. We're not saying I'm not saying that it is a replacement. What I'm saying is you let them, those people who never thought about it, to have a chance. Then subsequently they will make it a conscious decision. Hey, let's go and watch a live one. So post COVID that could improve. So current COVID, these are the things that we can attempt. Even like the Met Opera. Everybody knows the Met Opera, and I just started watching because they just started streaming this week.
Right.
Carmen is every 24 hours they stream one in the archive, and it's shot very well. The camera goes in behind. You go to the musician's pit, and you go into the actor, and then you get close up, because as the difference between you seeing it live in a one chair,
It's a very different
Now you
experience.
can see
now you can go
everything.
close and then suddenly you get more intimate with it, and it's a good way to expose people. So arts groups and cultural and creative people can work together in a sense to create new experiences. for post-COVID. I mean, besides the nuts and bolts of industry coming together to form an alliance or association, we have to look at new ways of bringing creative experiences to the people. So hopefully that is something that will stick. And besides the professionalization of the entire industry.
Yeah. I think what you also mentioned just now is also on the marketing part, right?
Yeah.
So this might be something that, you know, the freelancers can actually look at now. How do they make use of the government skill future credits, right? Maybe take up some course, understand a little bit more about marketing, social media. I think that, you know, will be useful, right? After this whole current situation settled.
I think there's a lot of, especially if you're 40 years old, like me. No, I'm not 40, I'm 42. Post 40, you get additional $500. So you have 500. I haven't used the first 500 because at the point of time, there are not many courses. And also, I have a problem with learning. Like, I also understand that it's very hard for people who are more inherently right-brained to take on courses that are designed for non-visual learners. I'm a very visual learner, and the way I learn is how I read books. I cannot do it one book at a time.
You must scatter it across. And
So
come back
when I
and
was young, when
Right.
I was young, my mom said cannot focus.
Oh,
I have
okay.
attention deficit.
Yeah.
It is
Which
true.
a lot of kids has now. Attention span is very short.
Yeah,
for
that's
all
because
kids.
I found out later in life
Yeah.
that my brain requires me to make sense of what I'm reading by going to another subject matter.
Okay.
So I can speed read very fast books
Yeah.
in different subject matter
Oh.
and make sense. I'm the sort that I need to make sense of myself. So if you give me a training program that's rigid and a set of exam questions, I cannot deal with it. Which is why I think now I know why I suffer from traditional learning methods,
Yeah.
which is now something that's studied.
Yeah.
So that could also be the way that we look at certain courses to be now created and to be marketed under Skills Future. But I understand they have a very strict what is that? What's that?
Guidelines.
Yeah, what is their
Yeah.
framework called?
Skill. There's a
The-
WSG.
yeah.
WSQ framework or something.
Sometimes it's difficult to structure a creative course under the framework. It's hard to
Yeah.
learn a certain course with the framework if you're not a traditional MOE style rote learning learner. So two things that I think can be done to make use of these grants, not just that, also the CDAS from NAC, $600. Also UTAP from NTUC, $250. So if you actually can stack all these things together, you can go quite a long way.
Yeah.
So now the issue is how to deal with the courses, because a lot of people in the group say that they find it very hard to pick the correct courses. So a curation for the sector could be useful.
Could be useful.
So
Yeah.
someone could put together a curation list of, okay, if you are an artist, these are good skill sets to add on to what you lack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the reverse, to find marketing costs, then
Yeah. And then you see
Yeah.
which one. Yeah.
because it's hard to navigate.
Yes,
This is the same as I think why polys have open house, and then you go there, you experience the what the students do and the school, and you find a school or a course that's suitable for you.
Yeah.
We need that sort of, so like there are maybe for NTUC freelancer fair they could consider doing that to help curate for specific sector.
Yeah.
You know, and then recommend a set of courses or create new courses together with the industry for the same sector, which is why professional trade associations are important, because if a group of car mechanics, sorry, I'll just use this for easier to understand, come
of course.
together, they can decide what and how they can structure training more efficiently than what a government body can do, because they can come out a high level concept of why we need frameworks and learning stuff. But when it comes to the vertical requirements of that particular group of people, only they know best. Yeah.
That's true. Right. Okay. Thank you so much for all the sharing.
Thank you.
So I think I mean we are quite hopeful, right, about what comes out. So I think for the freelancers out there, please just hang on, right?
Yeah.
I think, we will be able to see the light of the tunnel very soon, right? But we have one last question for Nicholas before we let him go. Do you want to ask the question?
This is something that we ask every guest who comes onto our show. Okay, so if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self when you're just starting out in your career, what would that be?
If I could give my younger self advice, I would say that it's very important to follow your gut feel and instinct. And there will be a lot of challenges along the way, but if it's not difficult, it's probably not worth doing it in the first place. So stick with your gut, plow through the hardships, and you will be rewarded.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, resilience. Yeah, you must be resilient.
I think it also gives it's sort of ending on a good note and sort of summarizes everything that we've talked about as well. That it might be difficult, especially difficult right now for a lot of people. But it's good that we are learning how to come together as a community, and as a country as well. I think globally everybody is just learning how to come to people as people. But there are so many possibilities out there as long as we stick to it and keep finding new ways to do what we do best. Yeah. So thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. So if you enjoy our show, do let us know by clicking the like button or leave us a comment below.
And don't forget to subscribe or hit the bell button to get notifications whenever we have a new video out as well.
And join our Creative Edwards community, as well as look out for Nicholas, SG COVID-19 Creative Culture Freelancers Professionals
Support Group.
Yeah.
It's here. It's here. We'll put it in the description.
Yeah. Until then, bye.
Bye.